Good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome. My name is Bill Hawkins. I'm a member of the Heritage Committee, and on behalf of the Heritage Committee and the Lake Travis Community Library, I'd like to welcome you to our talk this evening. And I want to first introduce Vicki Taylor, who is the chairman of our committee. Vicki, where are you? In the back. And the other members of our Heritage Committee, would you please stand up? Thank you. And I want to let you know that we're here and are very interested in your feedback and your input and where you think you would like to go with future talks about the heritage of Lakeway. And I want to also thank Morgan for the assistance and sponsorship from the library, and we really appreciate this assistance. This is the second in our series of oral history talks, and we have two more on the schedule at this point. Next month we'll be here on the 19th of February, and it's going to focus on the world of tennis. It'll be a very interesting talk. I'll share more with you later on in the program. And then again on March 19th, we'll be back here in the same room, 7 o'clock Tuesday evening, and former mayor, where is he? Charlie Edwards. Charlie Edwards will be back. He spoke in November and did an excellent job, and he'll be back sharing with us the topic, Lakeway governance. A very interesting topic if you haven't heard that. So tonight, we're going to focus on Lakeway's early years. And I can't think of a better way to introduce that than to have a talk from one of the founders of Lakeway. Well, I wouldn't say he's the founder. I would say he was one of the 10 original investors in Lakeway. His name is Frank Dinius. Unfortunately, he passed away during the summer, but we were able to create an oral history of his time, and that's what we're going to look at right now.
My name is Frank Dinius. I'm an Austin resident. I've been living in Austin since October 1945. I was one of the original 10 investors in Lakeway. I take a lot of pride in how it's developed over the years. The story about Lakeway begins in 1961, really, because Jack Josie, who was a resident of Houston, acquired up to about 15,000 to 16,000 acres in the hill country. He, being from Houston, also knows two individuals that are very important in the history of Lakeway. One is John Crooker, a lawyer from Houston, and the other is Flint Sawtelle, a businessman. And Lee Blocker was a very important part. He was a close friend of both of those two gentlemen. Those three had the vision and the long sight on what Lakeway could ultimately become. Crooker and Sawtelle were really in the hotel business. They had built the Commodore Perry Hotel in Austin in the late 50s. And so it was more of a resort type of facility that they envisioned. And I think that's what promoted them to take a look at the hill country and devise the planning for a Lakeway project. When it all started in 1962 and dedicated in 63, it was just a bunch of acres out here and that had a beautiful view of the lake, and there was nothing around. And I just think it convinced them in their own mind a vision which later turned out to be Lakeway. There was a big dedication program in 1963. Governor Conley was here, and Judge Jim Langdon, who was chairman of the Railroad Commission, and I had the great privilege of introducing both Governor Conley and Judge Langdon, who then gave the address for the dedication. It received publicity statewide, and people began to come and see the beautiful hill country, the view of the lake, and that's how it all started. So the next big project was to build an airport here and provide the facilities where smaller planes could come in and land, and people that came liked Lakeway. They liked the idea of the resort, and they liked what they saw at Lakeway, and they started buying the lots and building homes. It's hard to imagine what this place was like. It was just ranchland. There's no way that anyone in 1962 could envision the development of this property as has taken place. And it started from scratch. I'm hoping John and Flint are looking down and seeing what happened to their vision, because they really started it. Had it not been for them, and to some extent the original investors taking a big chance, it might not have existed.
Well done.
Well, that was quite an introduction. We're going to focus tonight on three areas. First, the Colorado River, which is so important to this area. Second, the dam, which created Lake Travis, and its importance to the city of Lakeway. And then we're going to focus on the 60s, really 1962 through 1969, which was the time that Lakeway was really created. And I'm going to talk about the Lakeway Corporation, the Lakeway Inn, and the leaders at that time, the ones who contributed so much to what Lakeway is today. But most of us didn't grow up here. I certainly didn't. You can tell by my voice that I'm from New York. My wife can tell me, you can tell why. But we came from other places, and I didn't know the history, but the history has so much to do with what our life is like, and we should, not only those of us who have been here for many years, but those of us who are coming into the community now from other places, and our community is growing quite rapidly, need to know the history so that we can partake and participate in our community. And so we hope that's what we're going to be sharing with you, not only tonight, but in the coming months as the Heritage Committee brings more information about how Lakeway began and how Lakeway developed to you. Well, let's start with the Colorado River. The Colorado River begins in the Panhandle area. It's highlighted right down the center swath. It starts up in the Panhandle and it goes for 862 miles. It's Texas's longest river. Can you believe that 6 billion gallons of water go through this river every year? Now, this year it was probably more than that because we had a lot more rain than usual. But the drainage basin is quite large, 42,000 square miles. So this land is not very, it's impervious pretty much. So water doesn't go down like it does in other areas of the country. It goes along the surface and goes into the drainage area. So that's why the area has these floods, and the floods have been violent and frequent over the years. And if you take a look at here, I hope you can see this, but this is a closer in view. Lakeway is right here, Lake Travis, but the Highland Lakes begin with Lake Buchanan up in the upper corner, comes down through through Inks Lake, Lake LBJ, Lake Travis, Lake Austin, and now Town Lake has been renamed Lady Bird Lake. These dams are part of the dams that created these lakes are part of the Lower Colorado River Authority, and that's what we have today. Well, let's take a look at the timeline of the Colorado River. Go back to 1840. Well, what was going on just prior to 1840? The Alamo, the Battle of the Alamo was in 1836. Texas became a nation after that war with Mexico was won. And the leaders of Texas were looking for people to come to Texas to develop the land that had now become this new Republic of Texas. And they were encouraging people from Europe to come. They were advertising, or I guess advertising, they were trying to get people from France and from Belgium, but a lot from Germany, and a lot of Germans came. Germans came through many of the ports, New Orleans, Galveston, but a lot came to Matagorda. And when they got off the boat, expecting, as Europeans might at that time, expected to be able to travel on a river, what they found was a log jam. A log jam that was up to 40 miles long, sometimes 20 feet high, that had been created by these floods that had washed the material downstream. So they couldn't navigate the rivers, they had to go by ox cart, basically, to get inland. And it was a real challenge, obviously a real challenge that they had to overcome. That log jam was cleared by successive floods over the years, but that's what they faced. In 1869, the largest flood ever recorded came down the Colorado River. It crested at Austin at 514 feet. Now, MSL means mean sea level. Sea level goes up and down, that's why they use the mean part of that. But Austin, at that time, or in Austin today, the city of Austin is reported to be at 487 feet above sea level. So that was a significant amount of water that was above the city of Austin. In 1890, yeah, there were more floods, but in 1890, Austin voters approved a bond issue for $1.4 million to build a dam. The dam was built near where Hula Hut is today, near where the Tom Miller Dam is today. It was 1,235 feet long, 60 feet high, probably just an earthen dam, because in 1900, another flood came and eliminated that dam. The river crested 11 feet above the level of the dam. What did downtown Austin look like?
Wow.
Yep. So that's what the uncontrolled Colorado River could do to the city of Austin and cities and the towns that were downstream before LCRA and the flood control measures were put in place. Well, back on the timeline. They rebuilt that dam, but unfortunately in 1915, it was heavily damaged again. And it kept happening. I'm going to jump ahead here to 1933 and introduce you to a man named Alvin Wirtz. Maybe you know or heard of Alvin Wirtz. He was a former senator and an attorney for a company called Insult Company that had been building private dams for hydroelectric projects, private hydroelectric projects in the area of Central Texas. They were on the Guadalupe River, but they also had been building a dam, which they called Hamilton Dam, at the site of today's Buchanan Dam, which is just the dam that creates Lake Buchanan. Well, 1929 had happened, and this company went bankrupt. Samuel Insall was a wealthy man, but he couldn't survive the 1929, and his company went under. Well, Wirtz was was appointed by the court as the receiver for this dam, the Hamilton Dam. And he realized that he was going to need federal help in order to, and was going to need government help in order to complete the project. And he's now sometimes referred to as the father of the LCRA, the Lower Colorado River Authority, because he wrote the law that eventually was passed creating the Colorado River Authority. And it was an interesting time. He was a proponent of LBJ before LBJ ran for office. And in fact, some people think that LBJ was one of his proteges, and he probably was. And with Buchanan, another representative, the three of them pushed for federal funds from these organizations to allow the LCRA to actually complete the projects that they had in plan. So in 1934, the legislation creating the LCRA was passed, but it wasn't passed on the first vote. It actually had 4 votes. And on the 4th vote, before the 4th vote, there was a compromise. Now, who was against this legislation? Well, the ranchers out in West Texas didn't want the people in East and Central Texas controlling their water. So on an earlier slide, you saw there was an Upper Colorado River Authority and a Lower Colorado River Authority. And that was the compromise. The ranchers got the Upper Colorado River Authority. Today that authority is responsible for the quality of the water. They don't have any dams up there that I know of. And the Lower Colorado River Authority has control of the dams, the flood control, the agricultural irrigation, and the hydroelectric power that's generated by this network. And it was Governor Miriam A. Grissom that signed that bill after the compromise was worked out. So, 1935, what did Austin look like? Here's Congress Avenue. Well, there was another flood in July. And there's Congress Avenue after that flood. So the Colorado River Authority had been voted in, but they hadn't been funded enough and they hadn't done the work. So when the flood came that June, it really was a wake-up call, and it was the jump start that they needed to get work underway. Now, I want to take a look at what the river looked like, Colorado River looked like at this time. The dam, Mansfield Dam, that we're going to talk about, was positioned at and planned and put in place at Marshall Ford Crossing. And many of us know Marshall Ford Crossing. There's a Marshall Ford up 620. Where the dam was Marshall Ford, and you can see that's what it looked like. There, in the background, there's a tree line. That's where the Colorado River was, and this flat land was really floodplain, I guess. And there's looks like a road going there, but I'm told, or I read, or someplace that if people from the Lakeway area want to go to Anderson Mill, which is up where the Oasis restaurant is today, it was 4 to 6 hours on horseback to get there. They went across Marshall Ford. You didn't just go get milk. You had to have a plan. Well, Loman's Crossing, we know about that. Loman's Crossing, we've got the road going right near where we are right now. and it went down to the river, and before that bridge was put in place across the Colorado River, it said that the normal Colorado River, to cross that, it came up to your horse's belly. Now, here, the bridge had been built across it, and here's another photo of that. You can see a Gulf gas station in the foreground. So that was a little farther back. Now we're looking back at Lakeway over there in the background. So that's what the Colorado River looked like at that time. And in 1936, work got underway, and they built what was called the Shaker Plant. The Shaker Plant was built down in the river, what became the river. The Shaker Plant is still there, but it's 100 feet below the water line. And it was used to get gravel and particulate out on these conveyor belts, and they carried it over to the site where they built where they created the concrete that went into the dam. And that was like a ski lift. To me, it looks like a ski lift, but you can see that's a big conveyor system that was taking that over there. So it was quite an elaborate plant. They had to build the plant before they could build the dam. So, back to the timeline. Construction began in 1937. At that same year, Representative Buchanan passed away, and there was a special election. Alvin Wirtz, supporting Lyndon Johnson, he wanted to run, he did, and he won the seat to fill out the term of Buchanan's congressional term. In 1938, Johnson urged the LCRA to begin a public power program because he ran for Congress on the platform. One of his platforms was to bring electricity to rural central Texas. Electricity was in town. There were private electric companies, but the LCRA, because of their hydroelectric generation, were and did eventually provide electricity at a very much more favorable rate than the private electrical companies were able to do at that time. In 1938, there was also another flood. And this one convinced the powers that be that were working on the dam. It was called the Marshall Ford Dam at that time, that they had not built the dam, they had not planned to build the dam high enough. And they added 78 feet to the design of the dam. And it turned out that really has had a big impact on Lake Travis and on Lakeway. Because that design change created what is called the flood pool. And we don't talk about the flood pool, but it's an important concept. If you look at the bottom of this chart, water goes up and down. We've been down as low as 615 feet sea level. And this year, with all the rains, it went way up. It crested at 704 feet above sea level. But the lake is full when it's 681 feet above sea level. And right now, we're right about at that. I think this week I checked it was 682 feet. Well, they added 72 feet to the dam because they wanted to provide a plan to capture the floodwaters before it went downstream and wiped out agriculture and the cities that were down below. So, because they created this flood pool, they raised the dam level, and they created this flood pool, and now they can handle in that lake approximately 75% more water. After it's full, it can take about another 75% water. They don't have to let it out, and they can control the water that flows downstream. So it's a very important concept that came about because of that modification called the flood pool. We don't talk about it, but it was really important. Now, if they hadn't added 78 feet to that dam, the dam would have been 672 feet high. Does anybody know what the sea level height of Graveyard Point is? 689. So, this area at Graveyard Point unfortunately had a lot of destruction, but that would happen all across, because we've had many times the lake gets to 681 feet, it gets full and it goes above that, and so without that control, we would have that flooding going down uncontrolled into the communities down below. So it's a very important concept that was added, and it's very important in the life of the river, in the life of the lake, in the life of Lakeway. The dam construction continued, and here's a picture of it at some point, probably about 30% complete. And some statistics that I think are important. The dam creates Lake Travis. Lake Travis is 65 miles long. So when it goes up and down 50 feet, that's one heck of a lot of water. And I've said that the dam is 278 feet high. It's over a mile long. How many of you have driven across the top of that dam? Was it fun?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying. Yeah. Yep. Did you know that there are 24 floodgates? The most they've ever had open at one time is 5, but there are 24. And there's a very interesting event going on right now. The dam was opened in 1942, and they've had no maintenance done until recently on the floodgates. They are now in the process of a project that will go on for several years to recondition each one of the floodgates as they go. And they've completed 5 of them of the 24. They're not going to complete that project until 2025. But it's going on right now. If you go to the LCRA website, you'll see some very interesting videos about how they're going about doing that. The cost of the dam at the time was just under $29 million. Think about, we could have had a police station for that. And there are 3 turbines that are generating the electricity, the hydroelectric power, 108 megawatts. Well, how much is that? It's about enough power for 150,000 homes. Now, we've got a lot more than that, but that's what's coming out of that one facility when it's running at full capacity. So LCRA goes on. They've now got coal-fired, gas-fired power plants, and the other power generation plants that are in the other dams. But this is the biggest one. It's the biggest hydroelectric project that they did. And I've talked about the flood pool, and I've talked about the height of the dam. So let me move on. A little bit further on in the construction, you can see those tubes are the floodgates being put in place. Well, how did the dam get its name? It was called the Marshall Ford Dam, but there was a gentleman in the House of Representatives by the name of Joseph J. Mansfield, long-serving man, member of the House of Representatives. He was the chairman of the House Rivers and Harbors Committee. I had never heard of this before, but it was a very important committee. There was one in the Senate and one in the House. And they controlled the projects for harbors and rivers throughout the United States and the funding for those. Well, Wirtz and LBJ wanted money to get federal money to complete these projects, so they needed some help. Mansfield came from Columbus, Texas. Wirtz came from Columbus, Texas. All three of them came from Texas. And somehow the money got funded. I don't know. The dam got completed. Whoops. And there's a picture of the three gentlemen I just referred to. This is James Mansfield. You'll recognize LBJ. And this is Alvin Wirtz at the opening of the Mansfield Dam. How do you think it got its name? And there was a plaque, really nice sentiments on the plaque. Basically, it calls him a public servant, a statesman, and a patriot. There's one other thing named after James Mansfield. Does anybody know what it is?
Town?
No, it's not quite that big. It's a library in Columbus, Texas. So, I think LBJ did his magic on Mr. Mansfield. So after construction was done, this is a picture of the dam. And you can see, you can imagine, if you can't see it, you can imagine the road going across the top. And here's what it looks like today as we have the new bridge that we're all happy that we have that bridge to drive across, rather than the scary trip that we would have had on top of the dam. So Mansfield Dam really changed everything. But before it all changed, let's take a look at what Lakeway was like. In 1958, this is what the land looked like. There was really nothing there. This peninsula is where the Lakeway Inn is. This would have been Sailmaster Dave, did I get the street right? Dave Baylor? Sailfish. And that up there is where Live Oak Golf Course is today. So we'll take another look at this. But that's what the land looked like, undeveloped. Jack Josie had 15,000 acres of land like this out here. And he was a friend of Flint Sawtell and John Crooker. And those two gentlemen, Flint Sawtell and John Crooker wanted to build a resort hotel. And Jack Josie knew that. And he had been promoting his land to Sawtell and saying, this is a great place for you to build that resort hotel that you've been talking about. Well, he convinced them to take a 60-day option on the land that he was offering. And they came out here and had a ride around the area with one of Josie's employees, and they saw that peninsula, and they immediately knew that that was what they wanted. They started construction before the 60-day option expired. And they brought in Lee Blocker. Lee Blocker came into this project. The hotel and resort community was planned and platted at the Commodore Perry Hotel in the Presidential Suite in Austin. And Lakeway got its name because of the Golfmont Corporation. That's the corporation that Sawtell and Crooker had. Golfmont had another hotel down in the valley, and it was overlooking a golf course, and they called that Fairway. So when they decided to build one overlooking the lake, they decided to call it Lakeway. The partnership grew to 10 people, of which Frank Dinius was one. And they purchased the original 880 acres from Jack Josie for the subdivision that was called Josie 1. Groundbreaking occurred in October 1962. And here's a picture from that groundbreaking ceremony. They had built a frame and covered it with plastic, but they had it nicely catered, and that's Flint Sawtelle giving a talk at the groundbreaking for Lakeway Inn. Construction kept on moving, and through 1962 and 1963, and on July 12th, 1963, they had the ribbon cutting. That was the official opening of the Lakeway Inn. Governor Conley was there. Judge Jim Langdon, the railroad commissioner, gave a speech, and Frank Dinius was the one who introduced him, as he said in the film. We all have seen this picture looking up at the deck at the Lakeway Inn. That deck overlooks the lake. And here's a look from the deck out over the lake. A beautiful day for sailing. The rooms, the original rooms of the Lakeway Inn were in these low buildings that went right along the edge of the bluff overlooking Lake Travis. And they were really nice. Have any of you stayed in one of those? They were really nice. Here's a look at the lobby at the opening. And at the far end, you can see that door. You can't read it, but that door is for the Lakeway Yacht Club. But the Lakeway Yacht Club had members, but didn't have any yachts. I think it was a social club. Maybe you brought your own bottle, I'm not sure. But it was in existence for many years. Here's a look at one of the rooms in those buildings that were around the lake. It was really plush. I think every one of those rooms had a fireplace. I stayed in one and it had a fireplace. It was really nice. And the pool. Now, I think an early photographer using a different version of Photoshop put that airplane there. I don't think those airplanes flew that close to the pool. So, who were the people that were the founders? First, there was Lee. I wouldn't say first, but the first one I'm going to talk about is Lee Blocker. Lee Blocker was the only one who actually lived in Lakeway. He was born in 1917 in Houston and raised by his mom. His dad, unfortunately, was killed in a train accident before he ever knew him. Lee was very industrious. He started working at the age of 12, not only paying his own expenses, but contributing to the family's expenses. And he worked his way through college. He went to Rice University. He went to the Columbia School of Business in New York City, graduated with a degree in accounting. And he worked as a CPA for Haskins and Sells in both New York and in Houston. He was active in Houston after his time with Haskins and Sells in the hotel business and in the construction business, and I'm sure that's where he met Sawtelle and Crooker. And he moved to Lakeway as a result of his partnership with those two gentlemen as they created Lakeway. John Crooker, also a Rice graduate, he was a lawyer with Fulbright and Jaworski. Well, we heard about Fulbright and Jaworski in recent times, but it was created by his dad was one of the founders, and at that time was Fulbright and Crooker. So he came from a long heritage with the law firm, Obviously, served in World War II and was decorated. He was on a high school debate team. And so Lyndon Johnson, many of you know, Lyndon Johnson was a teacher. And he was a teacher at a high school in Houston. He was also the debate coach. And he took one evening, he had his team competing with a team that of a different high school that Crooker was a member of. And I don't know which team won, but the next morning, Lyndon Johnson went down to the offices of Fulbright and Crooker and asked to speak with Mr. Crooker. Well, the secretary told Mr. Crooker that there was this man named Johnson out there who wanted to speak with him, and he said, okay, well, show him in. I was surprised that he did, but this came from an oral history that I found that John Crooker told this story. So LBJ was shown into Crooker's office, and he said, Mr. Crooker, I met the two best debaters last night. One is at my school, and the other one is your son. And I would like to take these two debaters on a trip and debate people all across other teams all across Texas. And I am willing to do this without charging any money for my time. And for the father, whoa, apparently the father was known as a pretty tough guy. And Crooker was surprised his father didn't say no, but his father didn't say no. But LBJ went on and said, and the only thing I need from you is for you to pay the expenses. And he did. And they went from Houston to Dallas to Fort Worth, down to Temple and Austin and San Antonio and back to Houston in 1 week. And they had a great time. I'm sure they won every debate. LBJ would have said they won every debate. But that relationship lasted throughout their lives. And you see here, the close relationship ended up with John Crooker Jr. being appointed chairman of the Civil Aeronautics Board by LBJ during his presidential administration. It probably had some impact on the functions and the business of the Lakeway Corporation and Lakeway itself. We already know that LBJ was a big part about the lake and the dam being built, the lake being here, but he also had a very strong connection with John Crooker. The third member of that triumvirate was Flint Sawtelle. He graduated from UT as a petroleum engineer, worked for Humboldt Oil, also served in the military, and he joined the Gulfmont Corporation in the 50s. Now, he was a partner with Crooker, and they bought the Commodore Perry Hotel in 1958, and at that time, they decided one of them needed to take over the full-time operation of the Gulfmont company. Crooker was tied into the Jaworski and Crooker, or Fulbright and Crooker law firm, and so they decided that Sawtelle would become the operations partner of the Gulfmont Hotel Corporation, and that's the way it stayed. Jack Josie had, I said, touted his resort property to Sawtelle. They came out here, they made the deal, and went back and started construction. And it was Flint Sawtelle who knew Andy Kivlin, and he brought Andy Kivlin from Houston out here to supervise the construction of the hotel. And Andy Kivlin continued on and became known in Lakeway as Mr. Construction. Pierre Caselli worked for the Gulfmont Hotel Corporation at the Commodore Perry Hotel in Austin, and Sawtelle saw that they needed to have an experienced hand come out and be the chef and eventually the manager of the Lakeway Inn, and he tried to talk Pierre Caselli into doing that. Pierre said, I don't think so. That's too far out there. I've got young children and my wife is expecting. Well, he kept after him, and they opened on the 12th of July 1963, and on July 14th, Bastille Day, Pierre Caselli agreed to come to Lakeway, and his wife gave birth to a son, Chris. And Chris Caselli was the first of Lakeway's first newborn. I mentioned Andy Kivlin. He was known as Mr. Construction, and here he's pictured with Ann Gribble, and they're standing in front of the Tejas building, which Andy Kivlin was brought in to finish it after the second floor concrete was incorrectly specified and it collapsed on the first floor, so they said, well, let's get Mr. Construction to fix it, and he did. And the other gentleman there is Andy's son. I think his name's Terry Kivlin. And here's Frank Dinius. I didn't mention this earlier, but Frank Dinius was a very highly decorated serviceman from World War II. He was the 6th most highly decorated serviceman in World War II. He didn't land on Normandy on the invasion of Normandy, but he was there shortly after and had a very significant role in the battle around Normandy and on into Belgium. He graduated from the University of Texas. He would go not only to every Texas football game, but he went, I think, to every Texas football practice. And imagine the four corners of the stadium, the Texas football stadium. There's one corner that Frank Dinius built a monument to the veterans of World War II. And if you're on campus and you have a chance to see that, I urge you to go take a look at that. He was quite a remarkable man. Well, they needed to have real estate sales, and Andy Kivlin's wife became the first salesperson for real estate. Sylvan Kivlin, and they didn't have an office when she started. The office was the hood of her car, and she parked it on Lakeway Drive between Live Oak and the inn and waited for people to drive up. And she would meet them, and they'd stop because there wasn't any place else to go. And she had a map, and she would show that. And there was a gentleman that in one of the two books written by Byron Varner, he tells a story about a man named Hamilton and his wife who came from Houston, and they happened to stop at Sylvain's car, and they said, we're not going to buy any property. We're just here to find out what's going on. And she said, that's okay. And she went and showed them what was going on. Well, by the end of the day, they had bought a lot for $4,000, and they bought 3 lots. But Mr. Hamilton, they bought your lot?
That's my uncle.
Your uncle? Oh, wonderful. They bought 3 lots, but he asked for the 10% discount in cash. Hey, I'm paying cash. I want that 10% discount. How many of you got the 10% discount? Well, this is the plat, the sign that they had. Those lots, I think the ones that are plaqued in were the ones that were sold already at that time. Here's the first sales office. They finally did get a sales office, and it was a portable building. Once it was a sales office, another time it was the pro shop for the Live Oak golf course, and then it became the pro shop for the tennis courts. So, not there anymore. Well, I said everything changed. Here's what it looked like. Here's what the land looked like before development. And you can see that point, which became the Lakeway Inn and those early homes. In 1969, after 8 years of development, here's where we are. And you see the inn and the guest rooms, the Lakeway Marina. This is Sailfish, did I get it right? Sailfish. The Live Oak Golf Course up there, and Porpoise Circle in the middle. Up there. So, things really happened, really moved along. But that brings us up to 1969. I have a couple of more. Here we had a marina. Here's a picture of the marina. And then maybe some of you had the chance to ride this exciting ride to get from the parking lot down to the water. I don't know that I would have gotten on that. And then here's a look of Sailfish before they built houses. Lee Blocker owned he built 3 houses down there. Didn't own them all at the same time. Blocker 1, Blocker 2, Blocker 3. And there's a plaque for Blocker 1 down there. That's Lakeway Heritage Commission plaque. And Dave and Vicki Taylor owned that house at one point. They could tell us all the stories. Well, another time we're going to be talking a lot about the Lakeway Civic Corporation, but I do want to mention it tonight. Lakeway Civic Corporation has had a tremendous impact on the city of Lakeway, and we will cover that in future talks. But one of the first things they did was to donate the fire truck for the volunteer fire company that had to form out here. Well, there had been a fire and it threatened the homes, and fortunately it didn't burn any of the homes down, but it scared them enough that they decided they'd have a volunteer fire department. The Lakeway Civic Corporation donated the funds, around $50,000 I think, to buy that, and these volunteers became the fire department. And here you see them at work, or I shouldn't say at work, they're practicing, I'm sure. But here the first fire chief was Al Swearington. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but that's the man who organized the volunteer fire department. He was the first chief. So that brings us all the way to where I want to say thank you to Lakeway's founders. These are the 4 gentlemen: John Crooker, Andy Kivlin, Flint Sawtell, and Lee Blocker. And thanks to them, this was taken, thanks to them for their work and their vision that brought us through the 60s with what we have in Lakeway, and really set the foundation for where we are right now. This picture was taken at a 4th of July parade, another one of the traditions and history of Lakeway. So, let me pause and see if you have any questions. And I do have one thing I want to come back to before we break. So let me pause now and see if there are any questions.
Nope, not that one.
Do you have a comment, Fred?
Oh, yeah. Just a little bit of trivia history. They found a barge that had sunk when they were building the Mansfield Dam. There was a huge barge and it got caught in a storm and blew the front off, and it sank to the bottom of the lake. And here a few years ago, and we dropped down to the historic low was about 15. We reached almost 15 foot to the lowest on the drought. And they found the barge. It was sticking at an angle, sticking up out of the water. And these divers had been searching for that barge for years. It was a real big old wooden barge that hauled stone into the Mansfield Dam. And these divers went out and they scavenged all the mechanical equipment off of it. And then they went out and put solar lights on it, so the boats, it was still droughts, it was sticking up about 6 foot out of the water, and they went and bought these solar lights and put on it, so to keep the other boats from hitting it. That's my trivia story.
Thank you.
That was a good one.
Down by the Shaker plant, I think.
Yes.
Okay, well, let me move on here. I just want to give you 3 reminders. This is the second of our oral history series. The next one will be on February 19th at 7 o'clock here in this room, and we'll be talking about the world of tennis, and we'll be joined by Cynthia Weichel, Dennis McWilliams, and Cliff Drysdale. Cliff was one of the first 8 professional tennis players on the Mars Hunt World Championship Tennis Tour. He was the first touring pro here in Lakeway at the World of Tennis, and he will be here to speak with us, to speak to us about his remembrances and his experiences. Secondly, many of you know the name Doris Vesperka. She wrote a series of what are called bedtime stories that are wonderful, easy to read versions of the work that Byron Varner had in his book, The First 25 Years of Lakeway. It's on our website. If you take a picture of this with your phone, you can go to that. You go to the website. It's also easy to find at the city's website, and go to the Parks and Rec link, and then to the Heritage Commission link, and you'll find those bedtime stories. There are 13 of them. They're very interesting and very, very easy for children to enjoy. And then I want to urge you to sign up for the Lakeway, which is the e-magazine from the city of Lakeway. If you if you're not receiving that, it's really a valuable tool, and I encourage you to sign up for that. So I want to say thank you for coming out tonight, and if you have further questions, I'll be here at